Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Garrity of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. And for our good martini, we have to go back to last week's all-liar edition of the Three Martini Lunch, in which we castigated Hillary Clinton, as well as Terry McAuliffe, and Katie Couric for lying. And it's the Katie Couric story that we follow up on today because, given the backlash to Under the Gun documentary, using doctored footage to make it look as though that gun rights supporters had no answer for why there should not be background checks for convicted felons and potential terrorists, Katie Couric has now admitted that there was not, in fact, this pause where everyone seemed to be clueless as to the answer to the question. She says in a statement, "As executive producer of Under the Gun, I take responsibility for a decision that misrepresented an exchange I had with members of the Virginia Citizens Defense League. My question to the VCDL regarding the ability of convicted felons and those on the terror watch list to legally obtain a gun was followed by an extended pause, making the participants appear to be speechless. When I screened an early version of the film with the director, I questioned her and the editor about the pause and was told that a beat was added for, as she described it, dramatic effect to give the audience a moment to consider the question. When VCDL members recently pointed out that they had in fact immediately answered this question, I went back and reviewed it and agreed that those 8 seconds do not accurately represent their response." And so she then goes on to post the text of their responses. So, Jim, the director is hopefully recovering from the bus that rode over her as a result of that statement. And the question is whether allowing something like that to go forward, she can ever get a reputation back.
Well, she shouldn't. I guess you could probably argue that Couric's reputation was already pretty damaged before this began. I could pick this as the good martini, Greg, because if nothing else, you know they wanted to ignore this. You know that Katie Couric and her producer just want to dismiss this as a bunch of crazy gun nuts who, of course they're saying. Now, because there's actual audio recording, we can say, no, actually, they did answer the question immediately. They did not sit there staring dumbfounded, blown away by the truth bomb inherent in the question from Couric's producer. Her solution, though, she said, well, we're going to post a transcript of the responses here on the website. Hey, how about you go back and you fix the editing you did? Oh, we can't do that. Well, wait a second. If you're admitting you put out something that is false, all right? They use a lot of other, kind of euphemisms. It misrepresented. It made them appear to be speechless. I questioned her. I reviewed it, and it just doesn't accurately represent the response. Hey, you lied. All right, you flat out lied. They had an answer, and you made it look like they didn't. So you did it because you wanted them to look stupid. Now you look stupid. The best way to fix this would be to change the documentary and put their answers back in there. But we can't do that. But we'll put a statement on the website for anybody who bothers to check that out. On the one hand, that's disingenuous. I think it kind of illustrates this further. As we speak, Greg, Trump is doing a press conference. You've seen a great deal of wailing in the media. Trump says things that aren't true, and we fact-check them, and we prove that they're false, and why aren't people paying attention to this? Well, probably Katie Couric has something to do with this. When you see this kind of response from the people whose job is to gather the news, when it was very clear that they're willing to be dishonest, I could put up the name, say, Dan Rather. You could put the name Brian Williams on there, Stephen Glass, Jason Blair. The world of journalism is littered with high-profile figures who were willing to lie in the name of a greater cause, what they felt was the greater truth instead of the actual truth of what they were there to report. So I think this probably indicates that once the fact checkers have proven that they're liars, the public kind of grows kind of immune to anybody lying and kind of shrugs their shoulders and says, everybody lies. So, but I want to salute the Second Amendment advocates and everybody who was furious about this because it means they finally have had to acknowledge it. As underwhelming as this statement might be, they are forced to admit that they falsified the reaction and that this is not a truthful documentary. It is propaganda, and it is meant to make people feel a certain way without actually informing them and giving them a equitable and fair hearing to both sides.
On to the bad martini now, Jim. And given the amazing levels of unpopularity for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, both of whom are in the overall nearly 60% market with their approval numbers in the low 30s, now is a fantastic time for any other party looking for a breakthrough. And a lot of folks, especially on the right, who sense no conservative in the race, are looking towards the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party had its convention over the weekend in Orlando, and they came away with the ticket most were expecting, that of former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson at the top of the ticket, and former Massachusetts Governor William Weld in the vice presidential slot. Those two in particular, not exactly ones that conservatives are going to love depending on the issue. Ian Tuttle, who subs for Jim every once in a while here on the Three Martini Lunch, wrote up a hilarious article on the Libertarian Party, but it's also tragic in some ways as he talks about how this is just a party that's not ready for prime time. He talks about some of the candidates, and then he talks about the debate, which is my favorite part. He says, the candidates opined on such pressing issues as whether the United States was justified in intervening in World Wars I and II, and whether they would have supported the 1964 Civil Rights Act. It's almost as if the debate organizers wrote the questions with the express purpose of disqualifying the candidate from national consideration. The audience doesn't help. When Gary Johnson suggested that perhaps the government should be able to deny blind people driver's licenses, boos were audible. Likewise, when Austin Peterson suggested that maybe, just maybe, there should be laws against selling heroin to 5-year-olds, and the candidates themselves offered up some pretty good old-fashioned bat guano crazy. This guy Perry said that contra the fear-mongering, Iran is actually just pursuing nuclear energy. Peterson peddled Howard Zinn-style history to explain why the rest of the world hates us. And sure enough, another candidate named Feldman wrapped his closing statement. Vermin Supreme, a beloved party regular who wears a rubber boot on his head and received 18 votes toward the nomination, spent the debate handing out toast. In other words, the problem with the Libertarian Party is it's the Libertarian Party. So, Jim, there's a lot of fiscal issues that many conservatives agree with the Libertarians on, but when you watch them in their natural element, it's a bit troubling.
Yeah, the simplest way of explaining it is that there are two libertarian parties. And if you write about them, or if you write about libertarians, you will often get an angry response from them that you are stereotyping them, you are going for this easy trope of dismissing them and being obsessed with weed and completely unrealistic about politics, that, there is a serious, very appealing philosophy at the core of it, one that should appeal to a lot of Republicans, should appeal to a lot of Democrats, and they constantly get dismissed as unruly, ridiculous lunatics who you wouldn't trust with your team. We watch your kids for an hour, never mind trust them with the reins of government. And, they say, damn it, Garrity, take us seriously. Then you turn on CNN, and there's a fat guy in a thong dancing on the stage. And you're just like, what the hell? Why? We leave you for just 1 hour, libertarians, in Orlando. It's Disney World. You're not supposed to be that freaky. Now, apparently they held their same hotel at the same place as Comic-Con, or as some major, cosplay event, which this guy was not from, all right? But what's interesting is that you have this, what in theory should be a very appealing philosophy, and one that I think a broad spectrum of Americans could say, hey, you know what? We could use more liberty in our lives. We should get out of each other's business. We should all be allowed to march the beat of our own drummer, and we don't need a nanny state looking us over. And then you go and you watch them, Greg, and you see them saying, yes, kindergartners should have access to heroin. And you're like, come on, nanny state. I mean, it's just they play up to their stereotype. They play up to their wacky image. And it sounds like Ian had a heck of a fun time. I'm sure that, as somebody, I think it was Iowa Hawk who put on Twitter, who said, look, 20 libertarians at a party is a really fun time. 2,000 libertarians at a convention is a nightmare. and it's unfortunate because they probably deserve, to their credit, Gary Johnson and William Weld, neither one of them ran streaking naked across the stage. They are a little more serious than you might expect. If you'd said, hey, which party was going to nominate two former Republican governors in 2016, I think people would not necessarily have expected the Libertarian Party to do it. But it sounds like there was some predictable ruffling of feathers about Weld because as governor, he was, pro-gun control and hardly a down-the-line libertarian. So we will see if the libertarians rise based upon this. I think they've been given a great opportunity by the two generally awful to disappointing nominees of the Democrats and Republicans this year. And they have the first step of the convention. They squandered it by looking like a freak show. And if libertarians want to know why they don't get taken more seriously, things like this are probably part of it. If you choose to march to your own drummer, there's always a chance that your marching will look out of step to a lot of other people. And, if you want to be off, you can go ahead. You're all about individual liberty and individual responsibility. But if you want to win, you have to think more about appealing to a broader swath of people. And, heroin for kindergartners tends to rub some people the wrong way.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah.
Jim, Ian mentioned in the story that, at least in one poll, that Gary Johnson was at 10% against Hillary and Trump. Do you remember what the threshold is to get in the debates? I think it was 15, but I can't remember for sure.
It sounds right. Now, a lot of people, I believe on paper, you are correct, Greg. Now, I think a lot of people have said if Gary Johnson's consistently polling at like 13%, just a little bit behind that, you would probably see an extraordinary level of pressure upon the debate committees to do it. Or you might see other groups saying, well, what, the heck with the Commission on Presidential Debates. Let's have, we'll invite all three and we'll see who shows up. And, we will see how it shakes out. Again, this seems like a year where the Libertarians have a great opportunity, but there's a question of whether they will make the most of that opportunity or whether they will squander it by looking like kind of a bunch of oddballs who are, lovable but not the least bit trustworthy with any degree of power.
Yeah, I think if Gary Johnson's in double figures and promises to keep the fat guy in the thong off the debate stage, they'll probably let him in. But it might be more than three. Who knows? Bill Kristol over the weekend. Apparently, unlike Mitt Romney, Bill Kristol is still not giving up on his effort to find another presidential candidate to run against Hillary and Trump, and now Gary Johnson. On May 29th, this was Sunday, Kristol tweeting out, just a heads up over this holiday weekend, there will be an independent candidate, an impressive one with a strong team and a real chance. And that got some nasty responses from Donald Trump and other people who point out that Kristol's predictive powers have not been all that stellar in the past, including that Trump would not win a state and perhaps wouldn't even last in the campaign until Iowa. But Jim, at this point, we haven't heard any more details from this. We don't know if he actually has this candidate locked up. But if he can't pony up here, it's going to look horrifically bad for him. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to put out this tease unless he's ready to put this candidate forward.
Greg, the way I put it is I feel like I'm being asked to join a bandwagon that hasn't been built yet. Are there a lot of people who don't like Hillary and Trump who'd like another option beyond Gary Johnson and William Weld and the fat guy? Okay, fine. All right. So who's the guy or the gal? Who's the option? And all we get from is, there's a candidate. Ooh, you're going to love him. Oh, he's right behind the curtain. No, can't show you yet. He's coming. Get excited. Get hyped up. Get ready. Well, can you tell us? No, can't tell anybody about him. But he's really cool. I'm really hoping we're not looking at Bill Kristol's imaginary friend, right? Like years and years before they saw Mr. Snuffleupagus on Sesame Street.
Yes. This
nagging feeling that Kristol has this person. Look, William Kristol does not appear to have been hit on the head recently. So on the one hand, yeah, it sounds like there's somebody. Romney's spokespeople keep pointing out that it's not him. He's not running. He's completely not interested. The other figure who's been most frequently mentioned and associated was Ben Sasse, the senator from Nebraska, who kept saying, well, look, I got small kids. I can't drag them around the campaign trail. I'm not interested. Beyond that, here's hoping, Bill. Okay, it sounds great. I just like to know who this person is, because once there's this person, we can start evaluating that candidate. And, are they strong? Can they really make a splash? Are they exactly what the conservative movement's been looking for? It'll be easier to get behind them when we've got a name and a face and a record and lots of other stuff to get enthused about. As it is now, we're being asked to feel excited about a candidate that exists only in theory. And until that happens, my enthusiasm is entirely in theory. It's entirely potential. We need an actual candidate. So we will see what shakes out. If this candidate doesn't come forward, look, people make bad predictions all the time and overpromise and underdeliver. It's kind of standard in pundit world. I don't know about you, Greg. I see that as one of the great benefits. But if there's no candidate that comes forward, or it turns out to be Irving Schmidlap, the state legislator from someplace you've never heard of, we're all going to be a little kind of disappointed and frustrated and kind of feel like the Kristol had overhyped this beyond what it is. So we will see how it shakes out, but we should just have Kristol Watch or something like that, some sort of sense of we're okay, Bill, ready when you are. I feel like there's a murmur in the crowd of expectation over this announcement that. Boy, that certainly made it sound imminent, but we haven't heard anything yet, Greg. And I'll just point out, according to Twitter, Trump has now spent 8 minutes talking about Kristol's tweets. So I guess that candidate, nameless as that candidate may be, already looms large in the mind of Donald Trump.
CNN loves those countdown clocks. Maybe they should just put the count up clock until we can actually get the Kristol.
There we go, yes. It has been X number of days since Kristol announced the candidate was coming.
Well, we'll find out the candidate before we find the plane, I'm sure. But
either that or Godot will arrive before that candidate.
Oh, man. What a start to the week. Jim, talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to tune in again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.